Senna from the SheShed France. If you've been before, welcome back. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I hope you enjoy what I'm talking about today. The channel is about mindfulness, flourishing and creativity, and today I'm going to be focusing on knitting and crochet and talking particularly about heritage and heirloom. The idea for today's vlog came the other day to me. I was doing something and I had disappeared into my own space, and I was replaying a conversation I'd had with somebody at a party earlier in the year. So back in June I went to a party for the then Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and we'd all been asked to bring things and so on, and I'd made some crochet bunting which I've displayed in the background today just so that you can see a bit of what it was and so on. And somebody was there, said, oh, that's an heirloom piece that, you know, can be passed on, you know. And I thought at the time that she was slightly bonkers in the sense that it was done with some very cheap materials and it was just done for that event. And so I don't think it's something that, you know, someone's going to bring out in 100 years' time and say, oh, look, my great-grandmother made this for a Platinum Jubilee party. I don't think that's the case. But at the same time, I think that there are things that are heritage and are heirloom pieces, and they become really important to us. Those of you who've been to the channel before will know that I'm not in the SheShed today. I'm actually in our loft. French houses are often built with lofts that can be converted, and ours was one which was like that, although you can see that it was very much built for people that are of a shorter stature. I'm only 5 foot, and there are areas where I can't stand up in here, but for me it's a useful space and I store lots of things here. And one of the reasons I chose to film here today was, I'm going to just move slightly and you can see here, this desk is here, and I obviously use it for a variety of things, but it was my grandfather's desk and I'm actually very attached to it. And so this is definitely an heirloom piece that has been passed down to me, and I keep hold of, and I'm very, very fond of. And that's one of the things about heirlooms, is that we are often very fond of those pieces in our lives. So that's why I thought today I might have a little bit of a chat about that. I often pattern test for people, and that's one of the things I've been doing at the moment. I've been doing a dress for somebody who's in Australia, and I'm not allowed to show that on camera at the moment because I'm not allowed to share it on social media, so I have no intention of doing that here. For some reason, the designer has decided to send us the pattern in pieces, which has actually caused a few problems for me because she's in Australia, I'm in France. There's a huge time difference. When I finish something and want the next bit, she's not always awake. And actually that happened at the weekend. I was actually working on something and said, right, I'm going to need the next bit, and she said, I'm jumping into bed, I'll send it in the morning. So I then had a number of hours where I was available to do something but couldn't work on her piece, and thought, right, well, what shall I do? I've got various things on the go. I've always got things on the go. But actually I started thinking about the idea of heritage and heirloom, and thought about some of the things that I'm working on at the moment and how they relate to that. So I'm doing a commissioned piece at the moment, and actually it's worth saying I do take commissions, and if there are things that you are interested in having made for you or for somebody in your family, contact me. You can contact me via my Facebook page, FromtheSheShed France, and I will put the links below and so on. So I'm making a blanket for somebody at the moment. Now I'm going to bring some of these closer to the camera, because what you will see is that I am using a series of different granny squares, and it makes it a combination of heirloom and heritage, because I think granny squares are heritage in themselves, because of the fact that they have been around for a while now, but people are using them in different ways and developing different types of granny squares. And so you can see that I've got quite a number here. So I quite like this one, which is a daisy pattern. So you have a daisy in your centre of your square. So I've got standard open granny squares, and then I've got circular ones, and I don't know if you can see that, but in the middle of this square is a circle, and then you change it into a square. I've got a variety of different squares that are coming together, and there was one other which I think I have failed to bring with me, which is a bit of a nuisance, but yeah, no, I haven't got it. So these are quite circular but with quite open bits. I've got one that's got petals on it as well, which are actually raised, which I rather like, but I don't seem to have that to hand. And then I've also got these where they're using 3 different colours, but what you can see is that I'm making this blanket using a colour palette of navy, mid blue and cream. It is actually cream, off-white cream, rather than an actual white. And so some of the squares have got all of the colours in, but most of them are 1 or 2 colours. And the idea is that they will be put together at the end to make a big blanket. So that has those elements of heritage and heirloom. So it's using designs that are old, that have been passed down, but it's going to create something that is also likely to go on and be passed down. So I didn't pick that back up on Saturday night. What I did do was I suddenly thought, do you know what? Lots of people are starting to talk about Christmas. Maybe I shouldn't mention it, but people are. And I thought, you know, it'd be nice to do something that's a bit different and something that could be passed on. And in fact, I'd had a conversation last week with a friend of mine who has got 2 grandsons, and she was talking about advent calendars. And we got into a conversation about not wanting to have advent calendars that are full of chocolate and so on, and what we did for our own children and so on. And at that point I thought, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to crochet an advent calendar? And the go-to site is great for this, which is Yarnspirations. Again, I'll give you a link in the, oh, of course it's reversed on here, sorry. I will give you a link in. So the go-to site is Yarnspirations, where they've always got free patterns, and I had a look there to see whether or not there was anything suitable, and very pleased to find that there was indeed a pattern that I could use. I will of course put any links to patterns in the text box below, so don't worry at this stage. So I found the pattern. But I looked at it and it's sort of a cream background, and I wasn't sure about that, and it's quite gaudy, and I thought, do you know what, I don't need to do it quite like that, do I? So I haven't finished it yet, but this is the background for my advent calendar, and as you can see it's bright red, so it's a lovely Christmas colour, but it's a colour that is actually, one, it won't show the dirt so much, which I always think is a useful thing, particularly because it's an advent calendar, people are going to be touching it, they're going to be moving things around, because actually what you do over the 24 days is you decorate the Christmas tree. So you start with all of the little objects in the pockets, and then you are actually day by day hanging them on the tree. So I'm hoping that I will have that finished before the beginning of December, so that I can use it as an advent calendar this year. And of course I will show that on a future vlog once I've got it done. And I will then be thinking about how I store that and how I keep that nice going forward and how I can pass it on in the future. I've got some ideas about how I'm going to change that pattern, but I'm going to hold on to that for now, and I'll talk to you about that in the future. Because I do this, I spend quite a lot of my time watching other YouTube channels, and it's a combination of getting ideas from other people about how to make vlogs, how to make what I'm doing interesting, but also about ideas for how to make things and so on. And I was watching a knitting channel yesterday, and suddenly something hit me like a thunderbolt, because yes, she designs jumpers, but she was actually showing how she'd got partway through a design and she didn't like it. She didn't like how it was sitting. So she decided she'd make changes to it. And it suddenly struck me that actually we should just take patterns as guides. They aren't the be all and end all. So I've had this sitting around, as you can see, it's a very old pattern. But I'm one of the things I have is lots of cardigans and so on, but I don't have many jumpers, and I really need a jumper, and I really quite like this one. But, and this is where the but comes in, I would like something that is a bit longer at the back, and probably has a split at the side. And when I was watching this yesterday, I suddenly thought, wow, I can use that pattern, but I can change it to how I want to use it. And I think sometimes we lose sight of this. I wouldn't think twice about changing a recipe. I very, very rarely use a recipe twice. So I might use a recipe for inspiration, but the next time I make that dish, I almost certainly won't go back to the recipe. I will think, oh, well, I used this and I used that, but actually that would work and that would work. And I add them in and do those things, or take something out and so on. I suppose I understand the basics about, you know, if you want something to rise, what you're using as a raising agent, if you're binding things, what you're using to bind things together. And actually you can apply that to your knitting or your crochet. Almost all patterns have got gauges, and if you do a gauge swatch, what you know is how many stitches per inch or per centimetre. So they've done the hard work for you, and you can easily adapt it. So I don't want the ribbing at the bottom of the sleeves, and I don't want the ribbing at the bottom of the body, because I don't want it to be clinging in that way. Well, that's fine. I can still use other dimensions from this to make something that's similar, but is actually looking how I want it to look. So I'm really quite excited now, and I'm going to use this yarn I've had sitting in a box for 2.5 years, waiting for me to knit it up. So that's one of the projects I'm going to be starting fairly soon. But actually that brings me back to mindfulness and flourishing, because obviously I do the crochet and I do the knitting for mindfulness, for flourishing, but the notion of not having to do something exactly how somebody else has told you you need to do it is actually a really releasing, invigorating, I can't think of another word off the top of my head for it, but it actually means that I can feel empowering. Actually, one of the things is it's actually empowering. I can take that and do that how I want to do it. And actually that's possibly an approach we need to take to life as well, that we can not ignore good advice that's given to us, because actually we do need to listen to what other people say. We do need to think about whether or not people have got knowledge and experience that is useful to us, that can help us in going forward. But at the same time, we need to be free to actually do things our own way, to try things out, to experiment, to actually flourish, to be able to do what is right for us. And so today I've talked a bit about heritage and heirloom, and I feel that that all links into the mindfulness and flourishing. We like things that have meaning in our lives, and that can be things that are heirloom pieces. It can be things that show history, heirlooms, where they come from, or heritage I should say, sorry, where they've come from. But equally, we take that and we adapt it for our ways of life and our way of moving forward. So that just leaves me to say thank you for watching this video. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give me a like. Do subscribe, ring the bell, and that way you'll know each time I upload anything new. Remember, in the text box below will be links to other information that I've given today, and also links to my Facebook page. So do follow me there, because I actually put a blog up 5 days of the week, so there's other information there. And also it's a good way, if you ever want to get in contact with me directly, it's a good way to do so. Thank you again, and I hope to speak to you again soon.